The calm silence of dawn was suddenly disrupted by the sound of an engine as a vehicle kicked up storms of sand as it traveled through the wastelands. Someone hit the brakes as soon as the vehicle entered the ruins, causing it to come to a screeching halt. The vehicle's rust-covered metal components creaked and moaned ominously, almost as though the entire thing was at the verge of falling apart. It almost sounded like the labored panting of a crouched beast, and the visible tubing of the vehicle shuddered before a plume of black smoke finally belched out of the tailpipe of the vehicle. The scavengers had never before seen something like this, a metal monstrosity that could move. Looks of amazement and astonishment were plainly visible on their faces. This car was built in an almost ridiculously crude manner. Its rusty frame had been cobbled together from 7 or 8 different types of vehicles, and the damn thing was brimming with spikes, making it look like an ornery metal porcupine. It had 4 ostentatiously large wheels that ground away at the earth like giant gear wheels, and the car bumpers had been replaced with savagely sharp blades. Clearly, they were not meant for protecting the car, they were meant for ramming opponents. The entire thing looked both deadly and savage, and it seemed just as ferocious and unforgiving as the wastelands themselves. 6 large monstrosities were chasing behind the thing at high speed, galloping forwards on their giant feet. They were split up into 2 groups of 3 that had been following the vehicle from both sides. These creatures looked similar to the ostriches of the old times, but their feet were wider and thicker, while their bodies were much firmer and more muscular. Not only could they move across the desert at breakneck speeds, they were able to carry extremely heavy loads of weight. In the wastelands, they were considered one of the most ideal types of mounts. The 6 monstrosities had 6 riders atop them, all dressed in strange outfits. Their haphazardly pieced together outfits were composed of various bits of metal, wood, leather, bone, rocks, and other unknown materials. Most likely, they had collected as many things as they could, then fashioned a crude suit of armor from them. As a result, every person had a different uniform, and one of them who had only one arm had actually grafted a metal gear onto himself as a prosthetic limb. Another person had grafted a jagged sawtooth blade onto himself. In short, all of them were brimming with the aura of the wastelands. One of the Bigfoot bird riders vaulted off his mount, then respectfully opened the car door and greeted the fat man within. The fat man was dressed in a sleeveless leather jacket that was dripping with machine oil, and he was protected by a coarse, exoskeleton-like armor that looked like a giant spider which had crawled over him. His hands were covered with leather gloves and were pressed around the wide belt around his waist, close to a pair of black modified pistols. Even these ancient, improvised firearms emanated the coarse savagery of the wastelands. However, they were a direct testament to his strength and his power. Outlandish outfits, ostentatious appearances, Bigfoot birds as mounts, and a savage-looking vehicle. All of these things loudly proclaimed the status of these men. They were excavators. Fuck me, we finally found some scavs. The fat man lit a coarse cigar. 2 plumes of smoke came out of his nostrils. Then he reached up and flipped open the protective lenses of his sunglasses, revealing a pair of beady eyes that were scanning the raggedly dressed and emaciated scavengers. Alright, let old Sly Fox have a look at how many of you poor bastards are still alive. In this chaotic era, fat men were as rare as unicorns. This man in particular was so fat that he had to be nearly 150 kilograms. He looked almost like an exalted king, and in fact he was as proud as any king ever was. When he looked at the scavengers, he didn't seem to be looking at other fellow human beings at all. Rather, he was looking at cheap beasts of burden that were waiting to be slaughtered. The excavators, colloquially known as diggers, were considered one of the more important groups within the wastelands. They mainly spent their time burrowing through ancient rubble and retrieving tools and materials from the old times. They'd conduct some basic repairs on what they found, then connect them together to form usable weapons and outfits. Eventually, they set up their own organization. These people often used food and water as a cheap way to convince the lowly scavengers to work for them. The scavengers would scour the ruins for usable materials on their behalf, and so the scavengers were quite familiar with the excavators. I'm willing to work. I only need half a strip of carrion each day. I'm stronger than them. Pick me. The shabbily dressed scavengers all clustered around them, fighting for the chance to be seen and chosen by the Lord Excavator. They pushed and jostled against one another, eventually beginning to fight amongst themselves. Silence. Silence, you dirty fucking scavs. I'm not here to employ your sorry asses. All of you shut the fuck up right now. The fat man unholstered his pistol, aimed at the skies, then pulled the trigger.